very good evening, everyone, and welcome to Election Night in Oregon. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm David Molko.
And I'm Laurel Porter, and I am so excited to be here. This is going to be a great night. In just about 15 minutes, we should start getting the first results in the Oregon primary. And there are plenty of big races and bond measures that we're paying close attention to.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's worth noting that turnout appears to be sluggish so far, at least compared to the last presidential primary in 2020. And one of the big questions of the night, how will that impact results?
So as we wait for ballot drop boxes to close and the first batch of results, let's bring in our political panel. Oregon 3rd District Democratic Congressman Earl Blumenauer is here after he decided not to run for re-election after nearly 30 years in Congress.
Also joining us back for another election cycle, Republican strategist Rebecca Tweed. And we'd like to welcome Democratic strategist Annie Ellison, the executive director of Emerge Oregon, which has a number of progressive female candidates on the ballot this year. Welcome to all of you as we settle into what we call the long haul here, right?
Well, let's get started. And first of all, off the top, I think from all of us here on our panel, we want to thank you, Congressman Blumenauer, for your 28 years in Congress. You were on Portland City Council, the Multnomah County Commission before that, the state legislature, your years of service, 5 decades. Thank you so much as you prepare to retire at the end of this year. We're so honored to have you here. And I'm wondering how you're feeling tonight. I mean, every 2 years you've been up for re-election, and now you're sitting here on election night watching. We're going to be watching the results come in as the people who would like to succeed you follow in your footsteps. How are you feeling? There must be mixed emotions tonight.
It is a little surreal, Laurel. I mean, this is the first time in half a century that I'm not deeply involved with an election night with stuff that I've got on the line. And sort of being able to be with you folks, sort of monitoring, watching, kibitzing, is something I'm looking forward to. This is an unusual election on several levels, and I'm looking forward as we watch the results come in, thinking about some of the structural changes, sort of the post-COVID sort of getting back to normal. I'm excited to be with you and to be in this setting rather than being on the front lines tonight.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and I can't wait to get your insights into some of these races.
Lots of questions here. Rebecca, I want to bring you in. Let's get started. What are you watching closely tonight? Which races?
Oh, well, I think what's happening in Multnomah County and Portland, what everybody's watching, is really interesting to me as somebody who works around the state. What kind of message is the outcome of these races, these levies, who wins, who loses across the board, from county commission to the zoo to obviously the congressman seat, which are big seats, big shoes to fill. I think it's going to send a big message to the state for what we need to be looking for in November. I'm excited.
And Annie, I mean, we keep hearing about turnout is so low. It's something around 20%. How do you think turnout is going to impact the races, and what are you watching?
So I mean, I feel like we say this every year, that turnout is down, turnout's so low, and then everybody, I drove by the McDonald's in Hollywood on Cesar Chavez, and everyone was backed up, dropping off their ballot. So it seems like, every year we say this, and then every year it just picks up and brings it home. But I would say, if turnout's down, but from what, right? Like, there's no competitive statewide,
primary.
There's no competitive U.S. Senate or governor or the presidential primary, really. So sure, turnout's lower than we saw. I think you said 24% this time last year in a midterm.
Right.
But there was a smoking governor's race on that, this time 2 years ago. So I have faith in all of my friends and colleagues to get their ballots in, to go to the drop box, maybe stop at McDonald's, who knows.
I mean,
what races are you really watching?
So the women running down ballot, obviously the congressionals, the CD5 and CD3, all featuring Emerge alum. We have 6 women who've been through the Emerge program running for Congress this year, which is an all-time high. And we talked about that cascading effect of a retirement of someone like Congressman Blumenauer, setting off this cascade of down ballot races. So House District 33, the retirement of Paul Holvey, I'm watching House District 8, and then of course the Multnomah County commissions and Multnomah County races. That's
going to be interesting there. Congressman, speaking of this, we're about 3.5 minutes from the top of the hour here, but you've sat in the studio many, many times in many different capacities. I think we have some archive video actually from November 1988 when you were a city commissioner and joined us here as an analyst. I think we have that clip here. Let's go.
And we would like to welcome back Portland City Commissioner Earl Blumenauer, who will provide election night analysis for us this evening, and was a former Oregon legislator, as a former Multnomah County Commissioner, and a present City Commissioner. Earl Blumenauer, you have been through a few election nights. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back with you this evening, and I think it's going to be a very hot one locally.
Oh, a lot of interesting issues, definitely.
Hot race then, hot race now. Some things never change.
And no bow tie.
And no, that was my other thing too, right? I wondered this though, because you have ran so many times and been through so many election nights. There's a lot of first timers, especially in some of the big races. What advice do you wish somebody had given you the first time you ran for Congress?
I think it's important to exhale, not take yourself too seriously. There was a lot of that going on in this election where people got spun up and sort of lost track of why they were running. And I say that with respect to a number of people on the ballot, but I think they were dealing with side issues and didn't have a chance to speak to the things that anchored, I think, the reason they ran in the first place.
And when you say side issues, what sort of things do you mean?
Well, I mean, the stuff that's going on now in terms of dark money. We've watched election finance reform hijack the process. It's turned us all into bystanders, including participants in the election process. And I think we lose perspective, and I think candidates lose an opportunity to really drive home why they're running. And I think people get tired of the sideshow. And we'll maybe talk about this a little later in the evening about the impact of campaign finance reform locally.
Right. Maybe not have the same impact that voters hoped.
Right.
Unintended consequences.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Well, you also put out a letter every year, right, for freshman representatives, and you rewrote that. What are some of the tidbits of advice that you give to freshman representatives? Because whoever follows you, we're losing all your seniority and your influence, and whoever follows you into Congress for the 3rd District is going to go in brand new freshmen.
Well, I'm in the process of rewriting a letter that I have shared now for 14 years to every new member in both parties. But one of the central elements, and goes back to a point I made, don't lose track of why you're there. Be sensitive, for example, to friends and family, your health. People get spun up in the sideshows, and there's lots of drama and high stakes and high voices. And I think when people lose track of who they are and why they're there, they're less effective. It's not good for them personally. And so I will be offering some spin on that in terms of being able to take care of yourself, understand why you're there, and be able to focus on what's really important, because that gets lost.
And you spent a lot of time in an airplane. I think you've counted up the hours, haven't you?
Well, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is not being in airports or airplanes 14 hours every week. Oh, gosh. That's going to be just a lifesaver and extender. And I'm looking forward to that very, very much.
Well, we're so glad you're here with us tonight. And as we speak of this too, the clock's about to turn 8 o'clock. There it goes right now. So ballot drop box time over. Want to talk a little bit about issues as we wait in these first few minutes for results to come in. I'm seeing the Multnomah County DA's race. It's still 0-0 on the screen over here. Potentially no bigger race, at least in Multnomah County, than this race. You may think of it maybe as a bellwether or proxy race for everything that some voters think is right or wrong with Portland. So public safety, crime, response to homelessness, addiction. Rebecca, how do you see this race?
Well, I look at when District Attorney Schmidt was elected, right? And that was 2020, a year of significant unrest in everybody's life, right? Whether it was social, cultural, within the judicial system, presidential, COVID. And he responded as the district attorney that I think Portland wanted and that Oregon expected, and that would rise to the occasion. What we've seen over the last 4 years is the issues that really mattered to Oregonians a couple of years ago with public safety and crime and homelessness haven't gotten better. So is this going to be an election that becomes a referendum on DA Schmidt? Is this something where we said, we gave you 4 years, we bought into it, we think you know the law, but you're not applying it the way we want? Or will people say, we want to give you another 4 years, right? And we've talked a lot about voter sentiment. Voters are frustrated. They tend to say they will vote out of being upset and being angry, But do we always see that change in their behavior? We haven't seen that as much as we would think we would expect here in Oregon. So is this race going to signal that flip of, we voted, we're trying to hold you accountable, you haven't met our expectations, we're going to move on? And what does that mean to the rest of the state too? Especially with the whole country is watching what happens in Portland. They have been forever. They certainly are now.
I'm finding that I've had several national reporters talking to me about this. One thing that I think people lose track of is that Mike Schmidt got thrust into this 5 months early.
Right.
I think that was, I think that was a mistake on his part.
August in the middle of it instead of in January.
He
when
didn't
would
have a
taken the term.
chance to build his team. There was turmoil in that office. It was in the midst of COVID. And to get thrown into this without having his footing in that chaotic situation, he didn't have to do that. He should have, I think, taken those 5 months, build his team, understand what's going on, have some of these things that were playing out in the community. And we were all there covering it, being part of things that were extraordinarily painful. And to take one of the most difficult jobs in the community and jump in the deep end without your team, without being able to work that through. And that put him behind the 8 ball. Even though he's been trying to do what he said he did, I think that was a tactical mistake.
Annie, you had something to say?
Here's what, so I'm curious, it's the way I've been sort of thinking of that. I heard a really funny joke and someone said, every day that it's sunny, Mike Schmidt gains 2 points, like as kind of a reference to, it's not that there's a problem with the values espoused by a progressive DA. The things that he wrote into office on are things that we value as compassionate people here in Portland and in Multnomah County. There's a problem on the streets of Portland. And it's like what is happening and the way things are going when you're an incumbent and it's this bad. It's hard. And I think the question is going to be, is he strong enough to outrun this environment the way that, for example, Kim Foxx did in Cook County, Illinois? That's another progressive DA who she was able to kind of weather this storm.
But others have been tossed out.
Oh yeah, Chesa Boudin, there's other progressive prosecutors, but I fundamentally believe these values that we elected Mike Schmidt on, I don't think that's what's changed. The problem is,
I would disagree.
Yeah, you guys are going to jump in
let's
here
go.
really quick because we just got our first results from Multnomah
Hold that
County
thought.
coming in the DA's race. We had 82,000 ballots in this first tranche, we'll call it.
that's the ballgame.
If we can bring that up here, we can look. Nathan Vasquez leading with 58% of the vote against Mike Schmidt's 42. Again, it is early. This is just the first batch of votes. For a little bit of context, Multnomah County says, in theory, in past years, it reports about 50 to 60% of all ballots cast within these first few minutes at 8 o'clock. So this gives you a sense of where we're headed. Annie, what do you make of the numbers so far?
that's a steep hill to overcome.
Even this early.
Oh yeah. Depending on how low turnout really is, one of the things we talk about in Emerge is projecting your turnout, right? How many people do we think are voting? How many people are voting in your race? And what you start to do on election night when you have a strong sense of how many people are voting is you start working backwards. How many of the remaining ballots do I have to win? 6 to 4, like that's 3 to 2. That's tough. That's a major reversal. The second half of the ballots would have to be like genetically so different from those ballots that we just saw. Again, I don't think this is a rejection of the progressive prosecutor DA values.
And Rebecca, you were starting to say you disagreed with
Well,
that idea.
I would disagree only that I think we all share the same values we shared 4 years ago. I think what's happened is other values and other priorities have
that's
risen
another
back to
one.
the top, right? So things like our quality of life, how we can afford groceries, what taxes have looked like in the last 4 years, those have risen closer to the top for public safety and crime and homelessness. So if that was your issue 4 years ago and that was why you were a Schmidt voter or somebody else voter, over those 4 years, different things have happened, right? And so particularly the economy coming back, that may have popped up. And so people that originally voted at a principle one way in 2020 are now saying, I don't really have time for that. I'm busy. I'm not really that upset with what he's done. So maybe they retain his vote as an incumbent.
Yeah.
Maybe it's somebody else because they're busy. or they care about something different, not because those haven't changed, but because other things have been added to it in 4 years.
Well, first results coming in as well in some other races, key ones as well. This is the Congressman seat, House District 3 there. You can see how these votes are coming in again early. The first batch from Multnomah County. We'll check the other. Maxine Dexter out front here, 52% of the vote that's been counted. Former Multnomah County Commissioner Sushila Jayapal in number 2. Eddie Morales, Gresham City Councilor there in number 3. Well out front there right now with double the votes of her nearest challenger in the race right now.
So Congressman Blumenauer, you haven't endorsed anybody in this race, but what is your take on the candidates that are running for the Democratic primary? And we should say that we do have a Republican primary as well, but your district is the most Democratic district in the state of Oregon, one of the most in the country, so pretty likely that whoever wins the race, these 3 leading candidates will probably go on to follow in your footsteps.
I was pleased to see the people who stepped forward. I've known them all. I've worked with them. I think they would represent, the values that we brought to the party. I worked with Eddie out in Gresham, the city council. Sushila, I was introduced by friends when she was running for this county commission. I obviously worked with her sister in Congress. I did not know Dr. Dexter, or a representative, but she has impressed a number of people with her approach. I was pleased to see the 3 of them. I deliberately kept my thumb off the scale because I know and like the 3 of them and respect them. And I want to be in a position after the election to be able to help make a smooth transition. Because when I took office, Ron Wyden had taken all his staff with him. It was I was thrown in 4 days.
Wow.
I had to be there on the ground voting, and we have a chance where there's 7 months to be able to work with the new person to get up to speed, to make it seamless. And that's my personal objective.
Well, we'll talk more about District 3 a little bit later, but let's get our first glimpse at what's happening in District 5, Congressional District 5, currently held by Republican Lori Chavez Dreamer. She flipped that to Republican for the first time in 25 years. And right now, of course, you can see the numbers are pretty small right now with just over 4,000 votes in, but Janelle Bynum way out ahead there.
I mean, just to go granular, because it's always important to look where the votes are coming from, right? What I'm seeing is in this race, Multnomah County is reporting, nobody else is reporting. So Clackamas isn't, Marion isn't, Lynn is not, Deschutes is not.
This is huge on the other side of the mountain,
right?
Where McLeod Skinner has run before.
Very strong there.
It's going to take these other results to round out the picture before we have a sense of really what the trend is.
Yeah, and Multnomah County is the last place I'm watching for this race. It's Deschutes.
It's everywhere
and
else.
Clackamas.
I'm curious to know, Control, when you get a second, I know it may take, if we can just look at some of the Multnomah County Commissioner races, since we know Multnomah reported a big bunch, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go down that line once we have those up here. I know that'll take a minute to drag out, because that's maybe painting a picture of the story we're telling in the Vasquez-Schmidt race, and whether that, here's District 1 there, Vadim Wazirski, administrative judge out front. Well, I would say out front, but they're virtually tied at this race with Megan Moyer with Disability Rights Oregon there, and then the other candidates behind. But that is pretty neck and neck, which means it sort of raises that question. Now, again, this is a nonpartisan race. Will this go to a runoff at this stage, right?
It looks that way.
And in District 2 now, it looks like Shannon Singleton out ahead in the early running here. Sam Adams and Jesse Burke tied. And again, this is one that, Annie, you've said that you think will go to a runoff, and you just weren't sure who the top 2 would be.
Yeah, and look at that. This is a small sample. I think we're still waiting for more. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see who the second is in this race.
But arguably, I'd say, Singleton is the more progressive of the candidates here, and they would tell you that as well. I mean, she was the interim director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services at the county. Willamette Week, I think, said that she was not the one they thought they would endorse, but they liked her policies. They liked that she gave the Joint Office a C after she left it. But as somebody who watches progressive races like this, Andy, what does that say to you that she's out front by quite a wide margin? Are they splitting the vote, Sam Adams and Jesse Burke? Is that what's going on there?
I mean, I don't know how much is in at this point, but I will tell you, this is my home district, and the amount of Like,
Oh, yes,
this
show us
is
all the mailers you've got.
It's about 21,000 votes total.
It is
right?
like, this is just, it's just been like negative, negative, negative. And then you have like Jesse Burke slides in with this beautiful little magazine mailer that I also have. But I'm waiting to see a little more, but it definitely looks like overtime to me.
Yeah.
And it looks like, I mean, you could argue the kind of pragmatic, less progressive crowd got a majority, or at least they're getting a majority right now. But I think I'm waiting for another round to see how that goes. But I'd be happy with it. Like, this was always going to a runoff, but let's see how long we're counting ballots between Sam and Jesse.
David, you had mentioned that Willamette Week didn't really think they would be going necessarily with Shannon Singleton. It surprised them.
Right.
But then the Oregonians said
the
they were
same thing with
surprised
Sam Adams,
that they
right?
backed Sam Adams, who has a
entertaining.
lot of political and personal baggage, but they said that he really had a lot of experience with government.
Well, here's what's interesting. So I know Burke barely spent in this primary, and so she was kind of sitting. I think she was waiting for the runoff. She's planning for the runoff. So let's see where this
And
goes.
we should say that she's running Nathan Vasquez's campaign for district attorney.
She is not. I don't think she is tonight. I think she probably got busy.
But we know that she and Nathan Vasquez for DA and Vadim Ozerski, seat 1, are all at the same spot tonight in downtown Portland together. So
It's an interesting
collaboration there.
It's an interesting strategy for a candidate to be running another election. You want to be very confident in terms of what you're doing, and that was a head stretcher for me.
Well, Congressman, let me ask you about the Multnomah County Commission, because you served on the Multnomah County Commission for 2 terms. How would you sort of size up and describe the struggles the commission has had for the last few years trying to address some of the issues facing Portland, like homelessness,
really good
behavioral
question,
health issues, the drug issues? I know you have some thoughts about how the
Yeah,
commission's been working.
it has been painful to watch from a distance. Part of it has there's been a little dysfunction internally. I think having an opportunity for Julia Brem Edwards to bring a fresh focus and perspective helped galvanize some of the things there. And part of it, their personalities. I happen to respect Sharon Myron, and I think a lot of the things she said was right, but I think it sort of got under the skin of some of the people on the commission. And she might tell you that herself, but this is an opportunity for 80% turnover in terms of the new county commission. And it comes at a time when I think there's renewed focus on so many of these things. I can't say how much I'm impressed with what the governor has done being involved with our local problems. I've never seen a governor go out on a limb like this. There's no advantage to be governor of Portland. I mean, that has political consequences for her, but she stepped up to try and help deal with some of the behavioral issues, help encourage some accountability, and she's, I think, played quite a role. And with the turnover on the county commission, I think we're going into a different era.
I just want to check District 3 and District 4 on the Multnomah County Commission here. That's Julia Brem Edwards in 3 to see how those results are going. If we can
And we should
pull
say
up the first
Brem
batch that's
Edwards
coming in.
was elected in a special election last May, so she's
Right.
now running for a full term.
All right,
That
I can
looks
see it here. It
about
looks
right.
like 77%
Yeah,
to 23%, but
pretty
TJ nodding. Sorry, Commissioner, we're missing your picture there in the graphic there. If we can flip ahead to race 4 too and see what's going on. That's East County. That's Lori Stegman's seat there. Points East, Gresham in East County. We're looking for that too. And
So
It's interesting.
Vince
Jones Dixon
out ahead there.
out ahead, but not by much over Brian
Yeah.
Knotts, who's an IT consultant in Corbett. But again, the numbers, if you look there, they're pretty low. Just doing the math there, about
Right.
And going back
13,000,
to
14,000.
the District 2 seat, that is an abbreviated term because it's Sushila Jayapal's seat, and she was stepped down so she could run for Congress. So it's just fulfilling the next 2 years. So that will be up again in 2026. So what do you think? I'm going to jump to Annie
Yeah.
here. What do you think about the county commission? Is there going to be a realignment of priorities? A lot of pressure on the chair?
I mean, from what you can see, there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm behind that fix it message. You know, we had talked about how folks are, we all agree, there's no lack of agreement that things are not going great with the the things the county's in charge of, which is homelessness, housing, the animal shelters, if you read all the political mail you get. And there's an appetite for a new direction. I'm excited to see these great women candidates, whether it's Jessie Burke or whether it's Jessie Burke and Shannon Singleton in a runoff, right? You've got Commissioner Brim Edwards. You've got, it could be Megan Moyer and Vadim in a runoff. I think we're going to see voters vote. We want to live we want to make this community a place where we want to live, right? I think that's where we've been. These conversations that keep coming up is that like people are leaving, people are moving. We have lost $1 billion in tax revenue. That everybody who's running for these seats, they want to build this community into somewhere that folks want to live, want to raise their families, start their businesses, stay.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing a shift in energy for sure.
And I think we're seeing it across the state. I mean, I've talked about this the last few times I've been here, that every ballot seems to be getting bigger and bigger. There's more people running for every position. And it's true. I mean, I'm working in Eastern Oregon right now, and between 2 counties, there are 19 people running for a county commission. I mean, the world is looking for energy and engagement. And, the question about whether we should expect to see the same in Multnomah County, none of us know that, because we know regardless we're going to have brand new people, brand new faces. It's a new direction, even if the new elected officials take on the partisan, or the policies or whatever, it's new people. We're seeing the same thing across the state. We just had 10 senators who couldn't run again. Every House seat is up for re-election. Congress is up in every single seat.
And speaking of Congress, I just want to jump in here because we have our first major race call of the night. I should point out KGW does not call races. The Oregonian and the Associated Press do. The Oregonian right now projecting that Maxine Dexter, state representative, will take the Democratic primary that's in House District 3. Again, the congressman's former district here. I should note the Associated Press has not called this particular race yet. Congressman, your thoughts with that first call?
Well, it's a pretty formidable vote at this point, and I would anticipate that this is probably what's going to hold. But the other two have, I think, opportunities for political service. And I've actually talked to both of them when we talked about opportunities for transition and so forth. And I hope they stay with it, because they care a lot. They've got obvious strengths and involvement. And this election had so many things that I think were tangential, that really obscured some of the things that they bring to the party. But I'm thinking in terms of all these runoff elections we're talking about, but we're going to have a dozen city council races.
Talk about a lot of candidates.
That's what's not on the ballot tonight, right? 12 city council races, the mayor's race.
Don't call me back for that show.
That's part of the backdrop here in terms of the churn we're going to see for months in our community.
Here's what I'll say is also in the backdrop of this race, I know we had a few conversations about the soft money, the outside spending, and it does seem outsized because there was significant spend in this race. But everybody remembers Carrick Flynn, right, from 2022.
Yes. Right.
$15 million.
So that was the 6th district.
That was the 6th district. Yeah, so that was like,
who's now in jail.
You can vomit $13 million on a candidate, but if the candidate quality is not there, it doesn't work. What you see here is Maxine Dexter is a quality candidate. She has a strong record, and she gets a boost from outside spending. Yeah, it's going to take her over the finish line. But I think we're still really getting used to this outside spending here.
Garrick was a caricature.
Garrick was a caricature.
I had a chance to meet with him. He was very deep on some things that I'd worked about. But there was no there to the campaign.
Correct. There's a there to Maxine Dexter, and you see that outside spending come in. It came in early. And you get a boost like that.
I mean, campaigns take resources, right? I've been outspent in probably 95% of the campaigns that I've won. But you understand your resources at the start of running a campaign and what's the message, and then you fill that, right? A campaign is time versus resources. Less time you have, more resources it takes to get that message. More time you have, you can do things, grassroots or different ways. But you still have to have a fundamentally good candidate. You have to have a credible message, and you have to have one that resonates with voters. And I think one of the strengths that Representative Dexter had, and I know her as Representative Dexter, is
From the legislature.
Yes, from the legislatures. Her impact was outside of county commission lines. And as regular everyday voters, we're not thinking like, oh, the end of this table, now that's a different commission, or now I'm out of it. They just want to know what's in front of them and what's the option to make their lives better. And Representative Dexter may have, it looks like, been able to communicate that message outside of county commission work into something that's more applicable for District 3 at the DC level.
Well,
I'm just wondering really
she
quickly,
had a very consequential session of the legislature.
Yeah, she's a workhorse.
Got kudos for doing that tough work. And of course, she has a professional career as well as a physician and a health administrator. So there's quite a package that she brings to the party.
All right, speaking of big races tonight, let's flip over to the other major race on the congressional side. This is the Democratic primary in the 5th District. The Oregonian right now calling that race for State Representative Janelle Bynum. I can tell you that Clackamas County, Deschutes County, Jefferson County, Lynn County, Marion County, all reporting results. So not in Lynn yet, but you can see 70% to 30%. That is the Oregonian projecting that Janelle Bynum will go on to challenge incumbent Lori Chavez-DeRemer in that district, one of the most closely watched in the country.
And
this
she
coming
really
November.
touted her track record beating Chavez-DeRemer in a couple of House races 2 times. She won by 2 points in one election and by 8 points in the next election, although McLeod Skinner pointed out it was a much smaller region than the District 5 region. But what do you think, Congressman? Janelle Bynum had a lot of Democratic support. A lot of Democrats
virtually
were lined up behind her.
everybody who looked at this race felt that Janelle was the person who could actually win for the Democrats. This is going to be a difficult race. Lori has done a good job of positioning herself on a number of things with organized labor, for example, and painting a very moderate image. Now, part of the problem is she endorsed Trump. Part of the problem is she has to deal with what the Republican agenda is. And she's not going to be able to skate away from that in the general election. But she's going to be formidable. She'll be well resourced. Janelle impressed a lot of people with her work in the past. I'm really, but every single group in Washington who looked at that, who wanted to make sure the Democrats won the seat, from leadership, a number of other organizations who felt, and they all endorsed her. And so,
well, Republicans do not want to lose that seat,
Well,
right, Rebecca? And what are they? They're
Finally.
going to fight hard. So tell us how this lines up, Janelle Bynum and Lori Chavez-DeRemer.
Sure. Well, I think it'll be an extremely competitive seat. That seat itself, regardless of who holds it, will stay competitive for probably a decade as people watch what happens in Oregon in Congress and how that that seat shifts. I think this will be a fascinating matchup. I mean, regardless of whether they, stick with calling this for Representative Bynum or not, you've got 3 powerful women who have very, very strong voting bases for them. And so when it goes to November, the challenge will be not who has the most money, in my opinion, as a strategist. It'll be who gets to the voters who might be flexible on 1 or 2 of these issues. And I never like the term moderate, because then you're kind of wishy-washy. There are a number of voters in that district that are very strong on either side of maybe that middle. And it might be that someone's voting for Lori the entire time, except one issue that gets pulled over here, and that could be enough. Or vice versa. So I think it'll really come down to targeting which voters, not just how many. And I don't know that it will come down to, I don't suspect right now the most money in that race wins unless they spend that the best way possible. And that will literally be talking to 3 women like us all individually about 3 different issues and 2 gentlemen like this about 2 different issues. I think it's going to be one to watch, really, for Oregon activists to get involved in.
Again,
right?
you're looking at the Oregonian call. Sorry, Congressman. The Oregonian call in this race. The Associated Press has not weighed in on the Bynum-McLeod Skinner.
the fifth congressional district is intriguing because I think it reflects Oregon. It has urbanized areas, rural areas, sophisticated voters, rednecks. I've represented a chunk of that. It's a beautiful district. It's growing. I think it's going to be involved as being a pivot point, although I think the person who gets in there, particularly if it's a Democrat who can build on it, build some momentum. but it's not going to be a safe seat for 2 or 3 election cycles, in part because it just reflects our diversity in Oregon, the change. And I represented a bunch of it in the past. It's a terrific opportunity for somebody to show who they are and what they believe in.
So for anybody who was feeling uncomfortable with how much mail and TV they were seeing, buckle up for this
Hey,
one.
we got to get through tonight first before we start talking about
No, well, what I'm saying is this is for the House. Like, we want it back.
Yeah.
We want to win it back. Sorry, Rebecca.
It's okay.
And
We'll still be friends.
yeah, and this is, Lori Chavez DeRemer is really, in so many ways, the future of your party. She's, Latina woman. She's very focused on the economy. She's kind of represents this swing area.
I think what's really
Republicans see her
interesting
that way,
too
don't they?
is Georgetown did this survey. Sorry, Laurel. That I think it's an annual bipartisan index they call it, and she came out as the most bipartisan member of Congress in Oregon.
Well, she needs
I
to be
think
accountable for her votes.
29 out of
To be clear.
435. But that's interesting though that she's ranked so
We will
high,
make sure of
and
that.
she's positioned herself in this way.
I've
Speaking of the
been
district
on-
attack
I've
to the
been
mill,
on
right?
those. I've been on that vote too. I mean, it's just what it disguises is the hard issues that you can't straddle, and that's what's going to be coming forward. We have another race in the Northwest on the other side of the river.
Losing
with,
Camp Perez and Joe Kent.
Yes,
District
and
3.
that's a rerun of the last election. No prisoners. It was a big upset. It's the #1 target for both parties, and these 3 races may well determine who controls the House of Representatives.
Isn't that fascinating that it can all sit right here in this region, right?
Indeed, indeed, and some very strong women.
Absolutely.
Well, and I love that you mentioned, Congressman, that it reflects the state, because that's really true. And for a while, we looked at the collective we, I'll just say everybody who agrees with me isn't that we, kind of looked at Bend as that place, right? You had people that had grown up there and generational families and farms, and then you had tech and innovation. And so when we were running races just in the state rep or the state, yeah, go ahead.
Can you do me a favor? Just sweep your hair over your shoulder. It's one of those.
Absolutely.
It's like when you don't have a commercial break in 2 hours, you got to tell somebody
Of
what's
course,
going on. Right?
Yeah. But we used to think of Bend as being that, kind of microcosm of the state of Oregon. But you're right, in this district really spans what people in
Because
Oregon
the
are
district
like.
is part of Portland, right? East Willamette Valley.
Drives from
goes
Port-
over the Cascades into the high desert.
Through the Madras, through Crooked River, all the way
But-
through
but
Bend
part
and
of what
Clackamas.
I feel bad losing, because I finally got Hood River County in the 3rd Congressional District. And that is sort of a microcosm of where Oregon is and where it's going in terms of high tech, recreation, agriculture. It's fascinating, and I'm going to miss the Hood River County in the 3rd.
I'm sure Congresswoman Dexter will take you for a tour.
I'm happy to do that with her.
Speaking of how Oregonians are feeling and where we're at, I want to talk a little bit about taxes and whether or not we, as
yes.
Oregonians collectively, this is the collective
The ballot
Oregon, love
measures.
taxes anymore, and the ballot measures we're talking about, including a levy for Portland Public Schools that's up for renewal.
Zoo levy.
A zoo levy. We've got something for the Columbia River and floods, so we're going to try and
The
bring
gas
those up
tax.
for you. The gas tax renewal. And the question is, one, I know, Annie, you've been talking about this, is not only are they going to pass, but how close are they going to be compared to years past? I think we have that gas measure up in just a second, so we'll take a look
So
at
people are
that.
going to take their frustrations out on the candidates or on the measures.
Well, let's see. Is this the
Okay, here
gas
is
tax?
the gas tax. And this is a
Okay.
renewal, so your taxes won't go up. It's 10 cents a gallon. It was first passed in 2016. I think it was promoted by Steve Novick, who was in the city council at the time, renewed in 2020. So it looks like it's going to
Yeah,
continue.
that's a yes
So we're
according to
close,
the
yeah.
yes according to the Oregonian. I want to say, I think 4 years ago for this one. Again,
77?
early results, it was 77% saying yes. So we'll see how these numbers shake
So
out.
it was close
with
the
that,
first
too.
time, and then it was a landslide. It looks like people took we were like, where are they going to take out the anger that is clearly present? Looks like right now they took it out on the DA.
All right, we also have the Portland Public Schools teachers levy, the Oregonian saying yes, projecting that will pass. This is about
That's
102 million.
significant.
Again, it's a renewal, basically supports the
margin.
cost of 600 teachers or so. It is a big margin, although less, I'll point out again, than 2019 for this one, which was 77% when those were counted. Where are we going next, folks? Okay, and the zoo bond, that's a little bit closer.
But this is also a renewal, and this has not been called yet. So still have ways to go here.
Interesting.
A lot of people love the zoo. Though.
Yeah, we've also got some
We are
stuff in
zoo members.
Tigard, Tualatin Hills, TVFNR, a new first responder levy in Gresham. So watching all of those to see
you have any Gresham
kind of how the
results yet?
story shakes out in terms of that one. I don't know. We'll see if we can dig them up for you. The control room I know is working, and it's like they keep reporting, and we keep bringing them up as they come up, right?
You were telling us earlier, Rebecca, that Oregon loves incumbents, that we have a really high percentage of returning incumbents.
We do. 96.3% incumbency rate in Oregon.
amazing.
It's one of the highest in the country. But we also have to, one of the connections I make too is that we do have the ballot initiative process in Oregon, which is a little bit different than a number of states have. And I bring that up in reference to the levies, is sometimes people look at issues like a ballot initiative or a tax levy or something they're voting for that doesn't have a person connected to it, and they don't have the same reaction that they do when they're voting for one person or another. And so sometimes you can see, yes, okay, we're going to keep passing these levies, and I think it'll be very different in Portland than in suburban areas where you see levies and tax increases being passed, but they don't always make a connection between how my quality of life is going and how individuals that are in office are responsible for those. And so sometimes, you see a little bit of a disconnect between those things. But I think one of the reasons we have such a high incumbency rate, to bring back to that, is because we do have options for levies and initiatives. So when people are frustrated at a policy, there's a venue for them to take it out there, not as much on their persons. Now, personally, as a strategist, I think a lot of that incumbency rate comes from poorly run campaigns against incumbents, but we're going to have a lot of changes in that in 2 years when we see how many new people we have coming in tonight. But yeah, Oregonians tend to vote people back into office, and I do think that comes from a place of being a hopeful type of people, right? We're not super happy, but we're going to give you another chance. Or we're not super happy, but it's not your fault, it's the system's. We're going to see how that works out, this election cycle.
So I think we just had TVFNR up in Washington County. That's a renewal. That looks like it is on track, at least at this stage, to pass. And I think we're also going to take a look, Congressman, at seeing what was happening with the new first responders levy that's out in Gresham, to see where that's going. And that looks like, at least at this early stage, it is on track to pass. So, Annie, it doesn't. Go ahead, Congressman.
That's very significant.
Yeah, because that's a redo, right? They tried last year, but they had the homeless services included, and they took that out. So this was just solely focused on public safety, and there will be a raise in taxes for people. The owner of a home assessed at $200,000 would pay about $25.65 per month, so that they can focus there on police and fire.
I mean, Annie, to your point, in conversations we've had about this too, it does not seem at this stage that voters are outright rejecting or saying no to renewing or even new taxes.
Yeah.
So what does that say to you?
I mean, I think to Rebecca's point, the hopefulness for the region. I think I would also say, like, public responders, cops and firefighters, it's hard to argue against not funding police and fire. I'm impressed to see the zoo. Looks like it's healthy. We talk a big game that we're overtaxed and we're like, rah. But at the end of the day, I think we do, we want to build a community that we want to live in and raise our families in.
Sure.
Stop me before I vote again. I mean, these are, people are cranky about the cumulative effect, understandably, but individually, as they look at them, these are things that we care about. And I'm hopeful that there's an opportunity. I think the trend lines that we're watching here are pretty encouraging.
Yeah.
That maybe we've turned a corner in the last year and a half. There's a different attitude. The national economy is remarkably strong. So these are elements that I think that we have to work with that I find encouraging.
Well, I would be curious, though, and this is for all of us, I mean, we're all sitting here agreeing that Oregonians have a hopeful perspective and might be something that we look to vote with, but we're also seeing in polls that Oregonians across the board are unhappy with their quality of life. So the question I think we're answering tonight, and then through to November, because we're talking about a lot of primaries, a lot of issues tonight and races that will carry through, is is there satisfaction with life right now? Are we going to see that tonight in the election? Will we see it in any election? But will we also see it in November? And I think the question that Oregonians have been being asked to ask themselves is my life better than it was 2 years ago? Is my economic quality of life better? Is my actual quality of life? Am I safer than I was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever, depending on their voting on? We're in the middle of learning that tonight. That's why primaries are fascinating.
In the abstract, it's easy for people to say they're cranky, they don't like the overall direction. But when we get down to cases in terms of individuals, or we get down to cases in terms of do we want the zoo bond or do we want the public safety levy, then it becomes real. It's not sort of being cranky. This is a real decision that we're making. And I think that when people deal with the real decisions, they tend to sober up a little bit, and they tend to be a little more forgiving.
I mean, to your point, you know, the data, a recent poll, I think from the Oregonian back in April, Tri-County voters said 22% said, only 22% said we're going in the right direction. 22%, right? But then you look at what we're seeing, how it reflects in the ballot tonight and voting on these measures, and there we go. We have a couple quick calls, I think, on the state level we wanted to get to here. So if we can take a look, these are Oregonian calls. I think we have Attorney General and Secretary of State, I think both on the Democratic side here. We'll wait for those to come up here as we do. As the ballot results continue to pull in, hey, turnout officially from the Secretary of State is now 21% as they count. So we're on our way.
And they say about a third of the ballots
right?
come in today, or they're mailed in today, because now we can actually mail them on Election Day. So we could see a lot more votes coming. Now, this is for, you can see there, Tobias Reed in the Democratic primary for Secretary of State. He's the current treasurer, term limited, so he couldn't run again for treasurer, but called for Tobias Reed.
Top election official, auditor, so on and so forth. Interesting to see what happens on the Republican side there, given I think the Oregonian didn't endorse any of the candidates, including State Senator Dennis Linthicum from Klamath Falls and Willamette Week. About Linthicum, and again, we're waiting to see the outcome of that race. So let's be honest, there are no good choices here.
Yeah, the Oregon Capitol Chronicle said all three have stoked false claims of voter fraud and indicated they want to end Oregon's decades-long tradition of running elections by mail.
And this looks like an Oregonian call for Dennis Linthicum. So it'll be Linthicum versus Tobias Reed in the general election there in the Secretary of State's race in November, which is kind of like you think about Secretary of State and you want it to be boring, which is not quite what happened with, you know, Shemia Fagan, who I know is very near and dear to your heart, Annie Ellis here.
She absolutely is.
No, that's the first thing I hear from everybody is I want my
Make
Secretary
SOS
of State
boring
to be
again.
boring. I'm like, okay,
Let's do it. Let's do it. I have faith in that man, Tobias Reed, to do that.
I think we have Attorney General, too, if we can pull that up.
And look, quality of the candidate in every measure that you win a race. Tobias Reed raised the most money, spent the most money, had the most name ID, had a clear, consistent message. That's a slam dunk. He's been, the muscle memory of filling in the circle next to his name is strong across Oregon. So that's a.
In the Attorney General's race, we have Representative Dan Rayfield of Corvallis, who served 5 terms in the legislature. Recently, the House Speaker succeeding Tina Kotek, and that race has been called. Shayna Maxey Pomerantz was a late add to the race. She said nobody should run unopposed, so it was great that she got in there. She said nobody was talking about the issues that she thought were important. She runs the nonprofit Race Talks, and she thought she still wants to see criminal justice reform and equality and justice. But it looks like Dan Rayfield will be the Democratic nominee for Attorney General. And then in the Republican slot, Will Lathrop has been called, and the Oregonian said about him that the Oregonian editorial board that he offers Republicans their most credible Attorney General candidate in more than a decade. What do you think, Rebecca?
I would absolutely agree with that, and I think any political party voter, any member of any party that met Will Lathrop would be impressed with him the same way they are with Dan Rayfield. And I think this is actually shaping up to be a sleeper excitement race based on just the 2 candidates alone, knowing both of them personally, knowing them professionally. They're young, they bring in energy, they represent a new part of their brand from a party affiliation standpoint, but also running for Attorney General shouldn't be a very partisan position to be taking, right? But I think they bring a lot of energy, and I think it will be more competitive. But definitely, I think Will Lathrop is a great representation of what Republicans are looking for. I think it does give some possibility to a Republican taking a statewide race.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been since Secretary of State Richardson. Certainly, we're walking into a presidential year. We know how Oregon tends to swing in presidential cycles on races like this, but I do think it's exciting to watch. And I think Democrats, Republicans, everybody will learn from watching these two candidates about the role, about what the new energy is from having some younger candidates running in the party. I think it's exciting.
I wonder if we can take a peek, if we have it in just a second as we continue the conversation, the treasurer race, just to see where that stands. And I would love to circle back to Multnomah County to see if we have any more reporting in the DA's race or the county races there. And obviously that, could tell the story of the night potentially. Okay, there we go. In the Democratic primary for state treasurer, Elizabeth Steiner, that looks like an Oregonian called state representative ahead of Jeff Goodman there, former Lake Oswego city councilor, out front, really.
It's hard.
77 to 23% there. And Jeff Goodman, of course, ran, I believe, for this position either twice or three times as a Republican.
It's hard to win a Democratic primary as a Republican. Can I just say?
But he got the endorsement of the Oregonians editorial.
He did. And like we've talked about before, I'm always excited for the cascade, right? Senator Steiner becomes Treasurer Steiner, and there's a cascading effect down the ballot for her seat. That's not terribly surprising.
Yeah. Well,
we have 3 statewide races over by what? 8:45? Good job, everyone.
Are you surprised?
Nope.
Nope.
So,
you knew
They're all sleepers.
State Senator
for sure.
Steiner, just to point out, running, she'll face off against unopposed State Senator Brian Boquist, who is one of those who was barred from running for re-election because of the 2023 walkouts there. So another race to watch.
When we go back to the 5th Congressional District with Lori Chavez Dreamer and Janelle Bynum, this is the first sort of on-cycle post-Roe v. Wade election we're going to see. Do you think that abortion is going to be on the ballot? Is it on the ballot now? Is it going to be on the ballot in November when people are considering these candidates?
Yes.
How much so, do you think?
Well, you watch this across the country, that we're seeing the consequences of that Supreme Court decision in state after state. What's happened in terms of women's health being at risk, people in the medical profession being very leery, and every state where the politicians, the Republican politicians, tried to disguise it or make it harder, voters saw through it and voted for greater reproductive freedom. I think it is going to be a major issue. It's something that people are not going to be able to stay away from. It's one of those things you can't straddle. Donald Trump may attempt to do that, but he also wants to claim credit for the Supreme Court that made this in the first place. That's not going to wash. Voters see it, and I think it's going to be one of those hard-edged issues that people are going to have to take a firm stand on, and the voters are going to be heard. And we're seeing it in Republican states, in Ohio, in Kansas. So it's definitely going to be, I think, a major factor.
I was just looking down here because we just learned that the Associated Press also called the 5th District for Janelle Bynum. So it's an Oregonian and AP call early in the evening, 8:44, so 44 minutes after polls closed.
Do you ladies want to weigh in on the abortion issue and how it's going to play into the election, and in particular this one, the 5th District?
Sure. Donald Trump's on the ballot, and he's somehow getting more extreme in his positions. I am looking at you.
Don't look at me.
And of course that brings it onto the ballot. And Lori Chavez Dreamer has to own everything that Speaker Mike Johnson does, and that man puts abortion on the ballot, but just by being the leader of her caucus. So,
is that going to be a tough obstacle for Chavez Dreamer?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how she navigates it. I think the best way to do so is to be honest about where she stands on the issue, and that's going to be the clearest way for voters to learn and for people that get involved into it. But it's a tough issue. It's always on the ballot, even if it's not anybody's top issue, right? I would venture, and in the 20 years of working in campaigns, I've never met anybody who doesn't have a position on pro-life or pro-choice issues. It may not be what takes them to the ballot. I do think it will be critical in this campaign, specifically because we have a presidential ballot that we have again, because Oregon has always been in a place that it's been in where reproductive rights have been considered safe in that camp. I think it's going to be an issue that's going to rise to the top. And it always will be a top issue for every individual, I think, particularly for women. Is that the one issue they vote on, or is there something different? I'm not sure we know, but it will certainly be a top part of the ballot and the top part of the conversation, and it has to be.
And
should
it was
be.
last election. I remember
Absolutely.
asking Lori Chavez Dreamer about it when she was on Straight Talk.
Listen.
And she obviously won the election. I think it was by 2 percentage points, 7,300 votes, so not a big margin. But she navigated it last election.
Part of what's going on in Congress is that there's a war between the governing wing of the Republican Party and
The wingnuts.
well, and the rest of them. I mean, it is.
You're going to take that?
You know, I'm proud of the fact that I have a number of Republican friends. Most of my legislation is bipartisan or nonpartisan, and I have a number of friends who are part of that governing wing. They are distraught that they're unable to move forward, that we had aid to Ukraine held up even though a majority of them wanted to move forward. And to have a minority of the Republican caucus hold them hostage. But the fact is, with that narrow margin, any 2 or 3 of them could do what Matt Gaetz did. And so there's a question about pressure in terms of being able to play that out. So I think the backdrop to this election on the national level is fascinating. And as I say, it runs through Oregon with in the Northwest.
These pivotal.
The fight for the House is going to be a showdown in the 5th Congressional District, absolutely.
And in a sense, that's actually, I think, more important than the Senate. I mean, the Senate, you know, I'm a House guy.
Really that.
But the Senate gets all the attention and the filibuster and stuff like that. But the fact is, if you control the House of Representatives, you control Congress. Nancy Pelosi had a 3-vote margin, and she controlled Congress. And the fight for who will control the House is really the direction of the next Congress. So the odds.
What do you think the odds are? You're an insider. What do you think the odds are that the Democrats get the majority or the Republicans
Well,
keep it?
if I were a betting person, I would bet that the Democrats control. I mean, I think what.
Are you a betting person?
I'm betting on that. What's happened, and I mentioned this split. We've had a number of very responsible Republicans throw their hands up and leave. The specter of not being able to elect a speaker for 15 votes, and then going back again, putting a cloud over Speaker Johnson, not being able to pass legislation dealing with immigration. I think that it's quite. The odds are very strong that Democrats are going to control the House. Odds are that we'll probably lose the Senate.
Oh, wow, that's
but as I said, if I had to tick one or the other, I'd rather have the House than the Senate.
We haven't talked about a couple of other districts, and we haven't put up any results on the 4th district with Congresswoman Val Hoyle, who succeeded Peter DeFazio, a good friend of yours. And in the 6th district, our newest congressional district, Representative Andrea Salinas, Mike Erickson, who challenged her last time.
Let's take a victory lap. Good job, Congresswoman.
We could take a look at those. I mean, maybe we'll get those in the queue, and then Clackamas County after that.
But are those going to be, do you think there's a chance that either of those 2 congresswomen could lose?
Salinas cannot relax.
Well, the fact that it's game on in the 5th, I think makes it a little bit less, if the entire GOP House crew is going to be out there defending Lori Chavez DeRemer, they have less resources to go and try and pick off a highly effective congresswoman.
I think this is an Oregonian calling Andrea Salinas over Cody Reynolds here, a
Well,
veteran and small
Andrea
businessman there.
was against, the Bitcoin billionaire.
And she's a Bitcoin slayer.
And here's Mike Erickson. Looks like it'd be a matchup between
Yeah, this is
Mike
an Oregonian
Erickson.
call. So that's a
2022
rematch
grudge
in the
match.
House
Let's
6,
go.
right?
Sure.
But she only won by 2.5 percentage points last election.
And
so
doesn't he
it's
have an
tight.
ongoing defamation suit against her for the last election?
I
and
believe
a campaign
he's still
ad?
suing the Dietrich,
It's
yes.
still moving through the appeals process and whatnot and back.
It
So
wouldn't be an election without litigation.
course.
Come on.
Yeah.
Well, and that'll be an interesting seat because I do think, numbers-wise, it's competitive. But has Congresswoman Salinas, again, has she done anything enough that those voters feel like they need to shift their vote? Or are Republican voters going to see this as an opportunity? Well, maybe they're fans of Erickson, maybe they're not. But is someone going to make this a competitive seat enough that they feel like their vote could flip that seat? Or will they put their energy elsewhere? And will there be enough Republicans or enough donors or enough voters to really make that difference, right? And with so many issues that we all have going on locally, sometimes that congressional seat isn't the first one that comes to mind when you're trying to use your voice on your vote, actually. Is maybe it's the commission race that's hot in that district tonight. I'll be curious to see what happens in Yamhill County, Clackamas County, lots of different things that move around in that district. So it's really going to be up to Republicans to tell other Republicans this is competitive. You need to actually play here. And it will be a competitive seat numbers wise, but where is that going to draw attention? As you were saying with CD5 being very competitive, will Republicans that feel outnumbered in other districts move their energy there? They can't move their votes, but will they move resources and support? It's
Just
hard
quickly,
to tell.
before we continue that conversation, I think Clackamas County, we have our first look coming in right now.
Well, I know you've
So if
been
we can
waiting for
bring
this
that
too,
up.
Rebecca. A lot of
From
interest
what
there.
I can tell, which is interesting, we've got the chairs race and then two commissioners races, and you can see Craig
Well,
Roberts
does this surprise
here.
you? I know we
Former
talked
Clackamas
about this,
County Sheriff,
Rebecca. You
leading here
thought
by 6,000
your
votes.
idea about the incumbents, holding on,
Wow.
Judy Smith's the incumbent,
Yeah,
maybe not playing out here.
I am surprised, actually, it's as close as it is. I would have suggested that Tootie would be leading, but that it would continue to be a close race through votes. It may continue to be. I've known both of them. I should refer to her as Commissioner Smith. I've known Sheriff Roberts and Commissioner Smith for a very long time. Again, Tootie, by all accounts and by polling and things you look at in Clackamas, has not been upsetting her voters enough to be making the shift. Sheriff Roberts has always had a great reputation, has run a solid campaign. I'm surprised these numbers are as wide as they are, so I'll be interested to see how those tighten up.
And this
And
is
again,
a nonpartisan race,
exactly.
but it has become kind of political, hasn't it?
But it's interesting how
It's
that
the
has
environment.
emerged, because Commissioner Smith used to be out there and sort of one that was a little almost fringe, hard-edged. Part of it is the composition on the council or the commission with somebody who is really out there.
Mark Shull?
Yeah.
Is that who you're indicating?
Yeah.
Congressman, let's just take a quick look
Multnomah-
at positions 3 and 4, guys,
Yeah.
before we jump in here. Position 3, this is the Oregonian calling that seat for Martha Schrader, who's the incumbent and the sole Democrat on board. She's been on and off the commission in some capacity since 2003. There again, this is you have to win 50% or it goes to a runoff situation. Can we look at position 4 if we have that? That's Mark Shull,
Fireside.
incumbent. Melissa Fireside being
Wow.
challenged there. She's owner of a construction management consulting company, and I believe, Annie, one of your
Emerge
candidates
alum,
here.
absolutely.
So
So
this is
one
interesting.
that,
Yeah, tell us about this.
yeah, this is an interesting race. The energy behind them. Remember the Recall Mark Shull movement? So Melissa Fireside is like we're talking about women driving this turnout, women down the ballot. This is that kind of race. So Melissa, she's a business owner. She's a progressive, and I think it can be really hard when there's two other women in the race to kind of to not have it pull too much. Like, it's pretty clear she's looking good for November.
Arguably, it's not Mark Shull's policies that are so divisive, so to speak. It's the fact that he made Islamophobic
It's
posts.
the words
You
that
can
come out
hear-
of his mouth,
Well,
which I think are policies.
But you could, but to your point, but you could argue it's not opposing tolls and things around
Sure.
taxes. It's what he posts about.
Oh no, he's fine on taxes.
Muslim people, or how he equates, things to do with COVID to the Holocaust and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah.
Just that.
yeah.
So this would go on.
Still
if it's-
37.
it
Yeah,
stays
they're
like
going
this
to
a
overtime.
runoff
This is great.
Interesting.
This is great.
in November, so race to
Yeah,
watch
because
there.
it's Mark Shull 37, everyone else 63. That's the way I read that. And what it's interesting, I think, what we just looked at that Clackamas County chairs race is you have law enforcement running to the left of Commissioner Judy Smith, and then in Multnomah County, we just turned around and elected a not Democrat over probably the most progressive brand of Democrat we've seen in office. So interesting vibes from Clackamas to Multnomah.
You're referring to the DA's race?
Yes,
there?
the DA's race,
Which still we should just mention has not been
Hasn't been
called
called.
yet, and we have not gone up in any votes. It was 82,000 votes at the top of the hour in Multnomah
So
County.
it's still 60 to 40.
58% to 41%. Nathan Vasquez leading in that race. Those numbers in Multnomah County have not changed as of yet.
So when we were talking about the congressional districts, what about District 4? Where Val Hoyle is representative. I've been hearing a lot about Monique Despain, that Republicans are coming out and backing her, including House Speaker Michael Johnson, Cliff Bentz, our congressman, a Republican congressman from the East Side. Do you know very much about her, Rebecca, and what the chances are?
I haven't followed that individual race very closely, specifically because I think Congresswoman Hoyle probably has that in the bag going into a November general with President Biden and challenger Donald Trump on the ticket again. I do think, as always, they're ones to watch. I mean, just because they're every 2 years or because something's felt like this is going to read a certain way, it's hard to know. It's why people like me have jobs. We bet on not always knowing those outcomes. So I would say Congresswoman Hoyle probably has it pretty solidly, but you never take your foot off the gas. Monique Despain has had a lot of energy, a lot of grassroots, a lot of movement behind Republicans that are what I think is a smaller minority of the really angry, very hyper-partisan, I will do anything to get a Democrat out. I think that number's smaller than what it feels like. But there are a lot of Republicans in that district that feel like it has continued to go on. We don't have representation. We're going to continue to fight for the best candidate. And maybe they feel like right now Monique Despain's that best candidate. I think there will be a lot of energy down there. But it's pretty hard to see it being one that flips.
I mean, talk about these incumbent Congress women being tough to beat, and nobody works harder than Val Hoyle for the people of 4th District.
The 4th District, however, is a challenge. I mean, it is a very unique composition. There's
And we have
the
the results
rural
there.
urban split. There are some people who are high energy and cranky. Val will not stop working, but Peter DeFazio represented most of this and made an art form out of sort of managing people who were cranky.
Yeah.
It is a very interesting district. And my point earlier in terms of Salinas, neither of those two women can afford to relax. I think they're both.
Nor will they ever.
They're both to be favored. I think they've done a good job, but they've got to work to lock it down.
You know, we haven't showed any results from the presidential primary, and it hasn't been. It's not a competitive one, but something that people have been asking me a lot, maybe you want to weigh in on this, Congressman, but is this movement across the country of the uncommitted vote. And we don't have that option in Oregon to choose uncommitted, but people can write in uncommitted. And
I've got that number really quick.
Do you have the number?
Well, it's the total write-ins because they don't break it down unless
Right.
somebody
Yeah, what
gets
is
enough
it?
votes. So total write-ins in the Democratic primary, 4.3% of votes counted. So that's 11,000 votes write-ins. They could be uncommitteds. They could be other things. So that's what.
Yeah, that's a
we
blip.
saw up in Washington,
Yeah.
they had 10% uncommitted.
Michigan had 13.
13 and 16% in King County. So it was enough in Washington to send 2 of their
Of
delegates
uncommitted.
as uncommitted.
Right. But this is, I mean, we won't have a number in Oregon. This, if I'm looking at it from the Biden lens, I feel pretty good about this, even though we don't know how many were, quote, uncommitted versus the Mickey Mouse and
Right.
the
Maybe wrote you in for president.
Yeah, who knows? But Oregon, because as David mentioned, they don't count them unless there's
Unless they're going to
likelihood
win.
that makes a difference. So we'll never have the breakout.
How much do you think that the conflict in Gaza, and we're looking at the race for, they'll be coming up here for House District 3, where Maxine Dexter has been, is the winner in the Democratic primary there, called there. And this is just the Oregonian calling that
This is
race,
the
right?
Oregonian
Not
and now the
AP,
Associated Press in the last
Associated
few minutes.
Press.
And my understanding is, just so we can set the stage here, Maxine Dexter's in North Portland at Polaris Hall, I think a live music venue, and we understand she's about to make remarks in a few minutes. So
Okay,
we'll
we'd
dip
like
into
to
that
hear
when it
from her.
happens, I think.
But I was just asking, how much do you think the conflict, the Israel-Hamas war, the conflict in the Middle East, is impacting the races, in particular this one?
Well, it is having a huge impact across the board. People are deeply pained by what's going on, the horrific attack by Hamas, but what's happened in terms, for example, with some of the settlers against Palestinians. I mean, this is a saga that has roiled the political side and is not going away. I hope we get to a ceasefire. There's been some encouraging developments lately, but this just fractures the political process in a way that's physically painful. And it makes a huge difference in Congress, where people are at each other's throats because this is so emotional, and people have real strong feelings and direct ties. I mean, we've all been to Israel, we've seen this. We hear it from our constituents, and it has a huge impact, and it's having a problem in Congress being able to function on things that should be, you would think, would be a little easier.
And as Maxine Dexter, if she goes on to win in November, which is pretty likely given the makeup of your district, what is it going to be like for her walking into Congress, and how will you help with that transition as she goes as a freshman representative into this highly polarized environment?
Well, her background as a physician, as a legislator, I mean, she's equipped to deal with controversy. She went through a difficult campaign and acquainted herself well. I have no doubt that she will be able to navigate that, and we have 7 months to be able to talk some of this through. I hope it's an even glide path. It helps the 3rd Congressional District have somebody be able to take their time to come up to speed, and I'm confident that she will do that smoothly.
And you said you think the other 2 candidates here that were the 3 leading candidates, Sushila Jayapal, former Multnomah County Commissioner, Eddie Morales, a Gresham City councilor who has the nonprofit East County Rising, that they have bright futures.
I think they both have track records to be proud of. They care about public service. In terms of their actual campaigns, I think they were well run. And so I think either of them has a future politically if they want it.
You both want to weigh in on any races that you're watching? Waiting for results?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the state house races.
Do we know what's happening?
Primaries?
Sorry, we can check
I can tell you what's happening in a whole lot of them.
We're in a couple minutes. Well, we'll do it. I know there's Maxine Dexter's district.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
I know that one you both
I
are
also want to
really
touch
consider.
on Christine Drazen trying to win back her old
Yes.
primary. That's House
Yeah.
District 51.
Let's go back to
State Rep James.
Clackamas.
We're not getting more in Multnomah County though, but yeah, let's talk about the
go to
state
the
races.
33rd?
Well, we're gonna pull up the results. Might take us a minute here.
Okay.
So District 33 is the one that was represented by Maxine Dexter.
Yes.
She had to step down because she was running for Congress. So now that's an open seat.
Yep.
And it really represents the heart and soul of downtown Portland, right? And all the
Absolutely.
issues that impact Portland. So can
Yeah.
you set the stage for us? And we have to say that you are backing one of the candidates.
Yeah, Shannon Jones-Isidore is in the current Emerge class. She is going to be the only Black woman in the legislature. And, you know, when you have...
Well, you're confident she'll already
I feel
be
pretty
in
good about the
legislature.
numbers, yeah. But
So
like
the
I
other
said...
candidates, just to mention quickly, Eddie, before you give your,
Yep.
sort of, Brian Duty, he's a physician and surgeon at OHSU, and Peter Grabiel, who's a commercial litigation lawyer, so running
Yep.
against
And a lot of
Shannon
the business
Jones-Isidore.
community.
Two
backing
fellas,
Raphael.
yep, two fellas, doctor, lawyer, got it. So what's interesting, we were getting back to this concept of candidate quality, okay? You can be outspent. You can be outcommunicated. Pete Grabiel outspent her 2-1, probably more. Brian Duty outspent her probably 3-2. And Shannon Jones-Isidore, I think she's got it. You know, she had her message. How could you, like, she's born and raised in Albina. She's a Marine Corps veteran. She's a treatment provider. She has dedicated her life to the issues that we as Oregonians and as people in this district, that is the heart and soul of our challenges, has said, somebody who can fix these problems, please, right? She's building housing. She's like treating people. She's healing people. And I would just want to point out, like, when you just get negative, like puppies, Betsy Johnson, Trump, homelessness, bad report card, homelessness, and then you see something like this gives you something to be hopeful
Were you
about.
and your team behind that one, though?
Maybe.
I helped.
She's in your class now.
She's in my
right?
class now, and you know, seeing the class, this is the kind of person that when she's running, the whole class came together around her and was like, what can I do? I think when people are losing trust in government, they want someone who's authentic like that, that they can trust.
Hey, quickly, Rebecca, on the Republican side, House District 51, that's
Shannon
Drazen
Jones-Isidore,
trying to get back her seat from
LFG.
James Eve. I think we have those results to see how they're going. This is the seat that Christine Drazen resigned from to run for governor in 2022.
And then her opponent was
there we go.
appointed to fill
Correct.
the seat,
Yeah,
right?
so
Now she's
similar
running
cascading
against.
effect, domino effect. When she left her position in the House to run for governor,
Right.
Representative Hebe was appointed in her place. Now she announced just a couple months ago, very soon or very close to the filing deadline, she'll be running for old seat back.
And no check mark on this one yet, but Oregonian, we're just told, has called
Hey,
for reasons.
Christine.
So.
Yeah, and it will tighten up, right?
She's
so these
back.
early
No.
returns typically be people that vote the first few days, right? That know how they're voting. You weren't going to change their mind. It will get closer. I suspect Christine will take her seat back. It makes sense. She hasn't been out very long. She obviously, wants to stay engaged. She was doing work in between, losing the gubernatorial race and this run. I think she's eager to serve, and it has not been a long enough time that I feel like she's kind of what we called like a recycled candidate. You bring him back after 20 years and run him again. She has a lot of great relationships, and I believe that her and Representative Hebe are friendly. I think it's just she wanted to run for a seat.
And she let him know that
Yes.
she was going.
Yeah. But it is interesting. So what does that mean, for Christine in the House? What does it mean for the new House she's walking into, which will be very different than where she left, the new legislature in general. So we'll see how that race turns out.
Any ideas about her political plans down the road? I mean, are you friends with her?
I am friends with her, but not that I could speak of.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. But I was wondering if she plans to run for statewide
Running
office
and
again.
losing is a really good harbinger to running and winning. I will say that. Like
She
running.
came very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Closer
Well, and I
than
think what's interesting.
I was comfortable with.
So leading into the House race that Annie was talking about, is I don't know any of those candidates, right? But what we're seeing, I think, in the political environment are, with so much political contention around the country, Republicans are trying to out-Republican each other in primaries. Democrats are trying to out-Democrat each other. And what you're left with, and this is in social media, it's in news, it's not just in elections, you're left with a large majority of people who feel not that angry, not that partisan, not that pushed to the sides, who say, okay, well, I didn't really need the most Republican, I just wanted a normal one. I didn't need the most Democrat, I just wanted a normal one. And you're seeing some third-party candidates, or in some races, the sixth candidate down the line, making a competitive run, because people say, okay, maybe it's not necessarily because they're so anti-partisan, but this non-traditional candidate that can bring some new energy. I do think we'll continue to see that around the country, but in Oregon, we're seeing races become very different than what we thought they used to be and what they used to look like.
I wonder if we could just take a quick recap of kind of where we stand in the key races.
Can't buy candidate
Oregon
quality.
3, Oregon 5, DA in Multnomah County, and those races, though those numbers haven't changed, we just want to bring people up to speed who maybe have joined us over the last half hour or so to sort of illustrate the story of the night. And the biggest calls so far have been in Oregon 3 and Oregon 5, with Maxine Dexter winning the Democratic primary there, according to AP and Oregonian, and also Janelle Bynum in the 5th, which is interesting, especially considering they seem to be so out front of their challengers.
And it sets up a very interesting November election as we kind of look ahead. And we should mention, I'm sure that anybody watching, they're very political because they're watching this show, but they know that we don't have any Portland City Council races in this primary, not a mayor's race, not an auditor's race. That's all going to be in November.
How is that going to work?
Because of the ranked choice voting. So that's going to be a whole new.
Dexter race
and
there.
you've talked to us about,
Did our lead just get bigger?
Congressman, just about how this new city government is going to be. You have your concerns.
Well, we're in a learning phase. We have a dozen positions that'll be selected for districts, ranked choice voting. I don't think most people will know what they're doing. They'll be confused by it.
The voters or the people that are running, both?
Well, I'm thinking the voters. It's going to be hard to explain. There's going to be a surge of activity. There will probably be some development of slates here in the city of people who come together. We haven't talked about the tyranny of campaign finance reform. But what it's done basically is taken the choice away often for candidates. They're subject to outside influences of people who come in and literally hijack races. They make bystanders out of many candidates, not just in Oregon, but across the country. And that is something we have to come to grips with because I think there's a risk of people being confused and disenchanted. There's a lot of public education that we need to be involved with in the fall, trying to understand it. It's a great opportunity for the city with new energy, but there's an effort here to try and make sure.
So it's just
we
not
know what-
outside money for the congressional races, but we're seeing outside money in local races? Is that, you've told me about that, Annie, right? That's kind of unusual?
So it's so interesting to me about the DA's race, the outside spending, was that it wasn't really independent expenditure as much as it was like adjacent expenditure, because there are no limits in that DA race. In the county races, right, you've got these kind of two.
All right, Andy, we're going to jump in here because
go ahead.
speaking of the DA's race, it sounds like current
Tick
Multnomah
mark.
County DA Mike Schmidt is speaking on East Burnside here. We're going to go ahead and listen in.
You know, I look around this room tonight, and these are exactly the people that I want to be in the room with. Claire and I have said that over and over throughout this campaign, that the people that we've gotten to meet along the way, that we've gotten to work with, have been the most amazing people, and I'm so proud to be here with you tonight. I got some prepared remarks. I'm going to read them. I'm going to try not to read too much. I'm so grateful to be in here with all of you that know that we can fix a criminal justice system that's been broken since its inception. And we can get better public safety results and outcomes. These things are not mutually exclusive. And I know that Multnomah County voters believe that as well. I've talked to a lot of them over this last year. So right now, looking at the results, we're down. Hey, if you know anything about me, I actually believe in data and numbers. This has been a hard-fought campaign, and we're still counting. And so as those ballots roll in, we're going to be watching them very closely. But regardless of the outcome tonight, I'm filled with so much deep gratitude. I'm grateful first and foremost to my incredible wife, Claire. My wife's strength, her love, her clarity. I am a dad. It makes my family what it is. And none of this could have been done without you. I love you. You know, when Claire and I decided to embark on this re-election campaign just over a year ago, she said something I'll never forget. She said, we're going to run again. We're going to show our two young boys that win or lose, it is good and it is worthwhile always to fight for what is right. And if you've been at some of the countless house parties that so many of you in this room have hosted for us, or door knocking or anything else, and you've gotten to hear my wife speak, you know she always says that she knows that we're on the right side of history. And everybody in this room, when I look around, that's what I see. I see the right side of history. And that we take action in service of leaving this world better than we found it. I want to thank our incredible community that's shown up to this election, the folks who knocked the doors, that came to our events, delivered lawn signs, donated your hard-earned money in this incredibly expensive race. I got to thank my campaign team, Andrew, Clara, Amanda. Aaron, Jack, Jake, Amaris, Vanessa. You all helped make this possible. and to the broad coalition of labor organizations, racial justice groups, community groups, faith leaders, thank you. Together we showed that this is a movement that started long before this campaign and a movement that will far outlast it. This is a movement which has been propelled forward throughout our history by my friend, the late great Senator Jackie Winters. When she passed legislation to make our juvenile justice system more humane. By my friend Senator Margaret Carter, who helped pass laws against housing discrimination. To my friend Senator Abel Gordley, who fought for cultural competency trainings in the courts and in police, and who had the grace to sit down with me so many times and talk to me about it and teach me. By Portland's teachers. Woo! We got some teachers. You all know I started my career as a teacher. I have much love for teachers. They're on the front lines to help us fight to end inequities in our educational systems and disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. Yes. By the carpenters. We got any carpenters left in the room? Our carpenters and labor unions who fight back against exploitive labor practices which undermine the working families in our community when wages are stolen out of workers' pockets. That makes us all less safe. Thank you to the carpenters and other unions. So this is a movement, and it continues on tomorrow. I'll forever carry with me the things that I've heard from our neighbors on this campaign trail. I've heard from the people of Multnomah County that they want a DA who will fight for gun violence prevention. Because we all deserve to live in communities where we can live free from fear.
All right, you're listening to current Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt making remarks in East Portland. Not quite a concession speech yet. There has not been a call in this race, but acknowledging he is well behind his challenger, one of his senior deputies, Nathan Vasquez, with 58% of the vote, 42% with Mike Schmidt there. We should acknowledge that the numbers in Multnomah County have not changed since that first 8 o'clock tranche, and we're waiting an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of ballots in Multnomah County still to be counted there. But obviously he's coming out early to make those remarks. Annie, what'd you make of that?
Yeah, that's that's what I would have advised him to do. I was advising his campaign was get in there, say hi to the people. I think we're definitely expecting another tranche before 10, if I'm following the county website correctly.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, generally we look at something like 90 to 95% by the early hours of the morning for Multnomah County. So.
And again, it's just the math. Like for, yes, there's half the ballots still out there, but they have to behave radically differently than the way and that's just, I think, inertia. Like it'd be mathematically fascinating if the ballots behave differently than they have. And I think that's probably the direction it's going. I do want to kind of touch on just kind of this idea of what was rejected in rejecting Mike Schmidt.
Yeah, it's a good question because can you blame him for all of Portland's problems? Or do you feel like voters are doing that?
It's absolutely not all on him. But when you look at Nathan Vasquez, people want experienced leadership. And Nathan Vasquez has like 25 years in the prosecutor's office, right? I think that experience versus new, bold ideas is maybe a trend that we're seeing, right? Maxine Dexter, experience.
Right. It's interesting that you say that because
Janelle Bynum, experience.
Well, Abbott Week in their endorsement sort of gave a reality check with Nathan Vasquez saying, quote, "We don't expect great things. He is a technician, not a politician. That's what this office needs."
Make government boring again. Yes, round 2.
Yes.
But this race has been bitter, political, personal, as he mentioned.
Yeah, they hate each other, right?
A lot of money been spent in this race. And what does the DA goes on to for the rest of the year, right? Schmidt.
So you're saying if Vasquez
So they're saying
wins,
that, they may not, get along too
Which
well.
could
I
be
mean, I don't know that they
interesting.
have really in the last
Well, Congressman, I'm
year
really
or
curious
so.
to get your thoughts on this race and what it shows. Again, no call's been made, but the fact that the challenger here, the senior deputy DA running against his boss, is looking, on track, at least at this point, that he could pull this out.
Yeah, I think that's the case. As I mentioned from the outset, I thought it was a mistake on the part of Mike Schmidt to jump in 6 months early without his team,
Right.
to inherit all of the churn and the problems.
Should we go full circle? Should he offer it to Nathan
Well,
Vasquez and
right.
be like, take it?
And you're sort of tempting fate on what will happen in the second 6 months of this year, right?
But it was a very difficult time. We remember that summer, the outrage, what happened with Donald Trump declaring war on Portland. We had the Proud Boys, we had Antifa, we had just such pain. And so it was perhaps the worst possible time to step in when there's so much upset and churn and concerns about racial
But
justice.
you layer on top of that, and we haven't really touched on this much yet, Measure 110, the measure that legalized possession of small amounts of drugs, since been recriminalized by the recent legislature. But how do you think, Rebecca, that Measure 110 and people's feelings about what they were seeing in Portland with open drug use impacted this race? Certainly they both talked about it, and other races across the state.
Sure. I mean, I think Portland in general became, for a good reason, a attention national spotlight back in 2020, right? For things that were happening here, unrest that was happening, political, but also for how competitive and intense I think our district attorney's race was in 2020 in a good way. I think even a majority of Oregonians didn't realize they voted for their district attorneys, right? I mean, for a lot of people in 2020, hearing that they were voting for a district attorney was the first time they knew they could vote for a district attorney. So there were a lot of reasons for that happening in Portland with that vote, with Mike Schmidt running then. And then you had 110 coming in at the same time. Plus you've got all these other crises that are happening in Multnomah County. If I'm a Multnomah County resident, which I'm not, I live like half a block from Multnomah County, and I'm specifically from Portland, I'm getting tired of people talking about the city that I love the way that we're seeing how plastered gets discussed in other places in the country. And I feel like this could be the start of Portlanders saying, I'm taking my city back and I'm going to give Nathan a chance. It's not all Mike Schmidt's fault. It's not all Measure 110's fault. It's not all the commission's fault, but something we've been doing in the way that we've been electing leaders isn't working. Let's try something different. With 110, that passed much stronger with a much wider margin than I think people most expected in 2020. Over the last 4 years, people realized maybe that wasn't the exact place to take it. Maybe our elected leaders aren't the ones doing enough at the local level. Let's go to our legislature, have them fix it, and let's see what we can do from there. I know we just repeated things everybody knew, but those conversations are happening around the state in regular people's homes.
And that's the reality.
How do we not have
But
110 impact us?
as a practical matter, Measure 110 was not implemented the way that voters
Correct.
Exactly.
authorized.
They wanted to have
There
treatment.
was
They're taking
supposed
some
to
power
be
back.
treatment. We have the worst record, one of the worst records in the country in terms of treatment. And instead of leading with treatment, it was the last thing that happened. And so it was just calculated to fail. Now there's been some modest adjustments in the legislature. I think there's some attitude work that's being undertaken. But this was not what we voted for. And I think it was political malpractice to not do what we promised the voters we would do with treatment.
Speaking of, you said it's sort of a modest change or course change. You could call it maybe a modest backlash in the DA's race, or maybe a soft backlash would be a better way to put it.
That's not a soft backlash.
Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the 3rd Congressional District again here with Maxine Dexter up front. I understand she just spoke a few minutes ago in North Portland, again declared the winner of the Democratic primary in Congressman Blumenauer's seat here by the Associated Press. Let's listen into that.
My team, I am incredibly proud of this team. Some have been with me for years. Some have just joined us on this journey. I couldn't have done this without you, and I'm so humbled to have had you on this crazy adventure with me. Every time. Our volunteers, you took time out of your lives to knock on doors in the rain and the sun last weekend. You made endless phone calls, texted voters about our vision, our values, and why it matters. And our house party hosts, I was told we had more house parties than some people had ever seen. Thank you. You welcomed me and members of our community into your homes. At a time when politics wanted to divide us, you helped bring people together. You set an example of how to build true community.
And you were listening to Dr. Maxine Dexter, the Democratic nominee in the 3rd Congressional District, the one represented by the Honorable Congressman Earl Blumenauer, who we are so lucky to have with us tonight. What do you think? Is there an issue that Dr. Maxine Dexter, when she goes on in November, and she has to go through the election in November, but as we've been saying, probably going to win that because there's so many Democrats in your district. Is there an issue that she could take from Oregon and take it to Congress that you think that could have some legs that she could start with?
Well, I think her record in the legislature dealing with behavioral health, dealing with housing, providing leadership translates. But she has a variety of things that I think our people care about, and I look forward to being able to work with her. It's a rich range of opportunities. Portland has a lot in our district, a lot of opportunities for service. She has, I think, the skills in healthcare, housing, behavioral health, and fresh energy. You know, it's time to get rid of some of the geezer baby boomers and get fresh blood in there, and she is certainly doing that, and I think it will be a welcome
Well, you will
addition.
definitely be missed. Your influence, your seniority, you've guided a lot of federal money into your district, into Oregon, including the Albina Vision Trust Project, and I know that is something really near and dear to you. Is that something that she could pick up on?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is part of an agenda that is underway. Albina Vision Trust is an example of that. We've got a lot of work that we have to do to be able to match those resources. There's no shortage of opportunities. She came with a lot of ideas. People have things that they want her to do. I think she'll have her hands full, but the good news, as I mentioned, is she has 7 months to ease into it and doesn't have to do everything overnight, and I think she'll use that time well.
Well, she'll find that Congress is very different than the legislature she's worked in, and I know Rebecca and Annie are really watching some races. One you've been telling me about, District 16. You're both like, this is a nail biter, this is excitement. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so this is a close race. We talk about that cascading effect when a major retirement happens, right? Ellen Rosenblum retires, Dan Rayfield goes for AG, his safe Corvallis Democratic seat opens up. This is 2 Corvallis school board members running. There's a woman and a gentleman, and yeah, that's close. Like that's I mean, all eyes on Benton County elections. I think that that one will. I think we'll be watching that one. It's
a few days past, probably.
Maybe a few days. Yeah, it's been. There's been a lot of landslides tonight.
I got to pull back a little bit because I think I used the term when we talk about this backlash, especially what we're seeing in the DA's race, and I said maybe it's a soft backlash, and I think you said that's not soft. But are we seeing what's happening in that race again? No call in the Multnomah County DA's race. Are we seeing, Annie, what's happening in that race with other races? Because I'm looking at the Multnomah County Commission races, and again, no new numbers, but 3 of 4 could potentially go to a runoff, with Julia Brim-Edwards the only one projected to win in her race, number 3 at this point. So is that backlash in the DA's race translating to others in Multnomah County or beyond?
Well, I think it was clear he took the lightning ride. Like he took it on the chin for the county. Yeah. It seems like.
Talking about Schmidt.
Yeah, because we were having this conversation about where are voters going to take. Voters have the feelings. We are aware of the feelings that the voters have. Where will they take it out? Will they take it out on the levies? No, a few of them did. Will they take it out on the county commission? We're going to run off pretty much all of them except Julia's. So. I think it was a place to take it out on.
Maybe they took it out on turnout, right? I mean, that is always a projection.
Well, you wonder about that. Do people just stay home?
Or they just, it doesn't matter because it's a primary. And there are certain circumstances where people care very much about one race or two issues, and that might be all they vote for. So you look at undervotes. It's much harder for candidates to call their own races nowadays with postmark voting also. Like as a consultant, unless you are winning by over twice the amount, I'm probably not going to recommend you make a statement tonight. Give it some time. We have new votes. There's a lot of people like me who vote on their way down to the studio, last day or whatever.
Was that you?
Let's give it some time, to see how some of these go. But Oregon's vote by mail makes it difficult to actually call all of these.
And now that we can
The sheer
postmark
volume
on
left in
Election Day.
Multco, like they're waiting for that next drop, but you're going to see some tick marks.
We're just
after.
waiting to hear from Nathan Vasquez in the race for DA, I think, and then we'll sort of wrap up the conversation here. I just want to ask Congressman, so far, what's the story for you, or the biggest surprise of the night that you've seen so far?
I don't think there are any surprises. I think the voters have been responding in reasonable ways. There's some areas of interest in change. I was a little surprised by the Clackamas County result, but in the main, these are people who are giving their government the benefit of the doubt, and they're being engaged. And I think it speaks well for what we can look forward to in the fall. There's going to be some serious pitched battles, but this is a good start. Voters expressed support for local initiatives that are going to make a difference for quality of life, and there's some fresh blood that's coming on. I'm encouraged by what I saw tonight.
Okay, appreciate your optimism
And
there.
what's next for you?
I'm not going to be on airplanes 14 hours a week or airports.
Tell me how you really feel.
I'm looking forward to spending more time here working on the issues that I've been involved with in the past. I can do that as a civilian, and there's being able to engage. I want to make sure that there's some smooth transitions in the 3rd Congressional District and with other people. I'm very eager about the next generation of political leadership in our community, making the transition with the city, what we're going to do with the changes at the county. We've got our work cut out for us, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
If I may share just a small personal
Yes,
story
please
about
do.
Congressman Blumenauer. So my mom has been telling me since I was 3 years old.
Your mom's in the building, by
My
the way,
mom's
right
Ramona.
now. Right?
Hi, Ramona.
She's watching.
Every time Congressman Blumenauer's name comes up, she likes to remind me that when I was 3 years old and she was a PTA mom, they invited all of the local elected leaders, like state rep, city council, everybody, to come to Richmond Elementary School in Southeast Portland, Northeast, I'm not even sure where it was. And Congressman Blumenauer, who I believe at the time was city council, is the only elected official that showed up. And so for 38 years, you have been impressing upon a very stout Republican mother out there that there are credible candidates and people who do the great work. And to hear that you're coming back and you want to engage in those things kind of brings it full circle of there is a way to have credible candidates and respectful environments, and there are generations that transition through these things, but at the end of the day, people who work hard get reelected to office. People that are credible and show up when they're being held accountable get elected to office, and they can build those relationships across party aisles. I am hopeful for not just November, not just what this looks like for people like us who nerd out on it, but what are the votes that are taking tonight? What does that look like for Oregon 2, 4, 6, 10 years from now? Are we there? Are we done with the knee-jerk reaction politics and knee-jerk reaction voting? And are we actually setting ourselves forward a little bit? Seems like almost every place in our state has had that reset option. Now, we've got new Senate, new House every year, new Congress, new Portland. Things are changing all over the state. Maybe that's the place we're going for the next few years.
And are you hopeful, Annie?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at tonight, it's women and experienced leadership, right? Even in Clackamas County, it's an experienced leader in a sheriff, experienced leader in prosecutor, experienced leader in Maxine Dexter. And people are, people are looking to these, women particularly who've been serving their communities and stepping up. And I'm just excited to have 5 congresswomen from Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable.
huge.
Yeah.
Well, Congressman, you were talking about too working on the transition. Are you going to be helping advise or teaching a class at PCC on city government and transition, getting involved in the new government?
I will be doing some things. I'm looking at options. People have lots of ideas about what I should do with my life as a civilian, and I'm going to exhale, take my time to work that through. But as I say, we'll come back and work on. I think what we've seen in the last year is very encouraging. What has happened in our community, what's happened with people who've stepped up to assume leadership, trend lines are improved, and I'm quite bullish on what we're going to do going forward.
Well, I've got this question for you too. While we're talking about the county and some of the races that we're waiting on here is, what, in your view, and Laurel sort of started the evening asking this, what needs to happen at the county? Because you could argue, 4 out of the 5 seats are up, except for the chair, Jessica Vega-Peterson. She's got another 2 years on her term. You've been on the county commission. What needs to happen there, not only in the county, but how it interacts with the city, in your view?
Well, it remains to be seen what happens at the city, but I'm hopeful. We've seen some signals in the last couple of years of greater cooperation locally. I think that you're seeing some of the people in the county commission kind of flex their muscles a little bit, that they have an equal say in setting the agenda. There's powers for the chair, but the individual people have been more engaged. I think the chair is working with new members on the commission. I find that encouraging. And as I mentioned, the unprecedented involvement with the state and the governor working with us on this stuff. I see the last year and a half very positive, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it coming back.
People will always notice that you have the bicycle pin on. How many pins do you think you've given away?
Good question.
Tens of thousands, I will say. It's we're officially bike partisan, and I've pinned it on the Dalai Lama, on the presidents of India. I didn't on the president of India because the bicycle is the symbol of the opposition party. Oh dear. And he was outraged, thinking that I was trying to get him unelected. But it's a little icebreaker. I'm proud to have done it, and it's an icon here. Bow ties and bike pins.
What happens to the bicycle caucus now?
I have handed it off to a member who's going to take it next Congress, Congressman Thompson from Napa Valley. We've had some official ceremonies. I'm trying to do this with issues that I've been working on in Congress, is to wrap them up and hand them off to other people. I've been doing that for the last 8 months, and I will be done by November.
It's interesting. Big transition time for you, too. Hey, Multnomah County DA's race, too close to call still, but we just want to check in with Kyle Leboshi. I think he talked to Nathan Vasquez, the challenger, just a short time ago, and just sent us some of that interview. Let's take a look.
We're here at the Huxton Hotel in Northwest Portland with the challenger, Nathan Vasquez. Early returns so far. What are your thoughts?
Very excited. It's feeling great, very optimistic. I'm humbled by the support that I've received from my volunteers and supporters, and I think this community is really ready for change, and I'm ready to help us get into a better, healthier place.
You started the night with a positive note for your supporters, talking about belief and belief in the community. What can you tell the community about that?
Well, this is a time where I think a lot of our community are looking for that belief, that hope, and I believe tonight is going to be a change in that direction. And I really want to deliver that to our community in a way that feels positive and hopeful, so that everyone in this community feels included, everyone feels like they can have a safe community where they can go to parks, can go down the street, and can really enjoy this wonderful, amazing city and county that we live in. And I'm just so hopeful for tonight.
Finally, this has been a hard-fought campaign.
Yes.
The finish line is close. How are you feeling emotionally?
Certainly a bit tired and worn out. It's been a year-long period of knocking on a lot of doors, trying to really get out and meet with the community. But, I'm feeling energized.
Thanks so much.
All right.
We'll let you return to your supporters here in Northwest Portland. I'm Kyle Leboshi, KGW News.
All right, the finish line close, but not that close at this point. Again, 58% to 42%, so we're going to see how that shakes out in the DA's race there. Just get a final thought from all of you on our panel. Thanks for being here with us this evening. I know it's been a bit of a slog as we sort of watch the results trickle in piece by piece, which is how these nights go, right? But Annie Ellison, let's start with you here. Final thought for the evening.
I think my final thought is that money cannot buy a quality candidate with a strong message who connects with people and makes them feel hopeful about this community. I think that's kind of my parting thought.
Sure. Mine is to hold all of us voters accountable and pay attention to what is going to be on the ballot in November. We have a responsibility to get involved. It's early to tell you to register to vote and make a plan for it, but I think we need to be responsible as Oregonians too. We've done the elects, we've done the held them accountable, we've done the referendums. We need to show up in our communities and when we vote.
That's a good point, because we do have a low voter turnout. We hope for a lot more, of course, in November, because they're key races that determine the future. I watched my grandson all day today before I came in, and I thought, you know, it's his future. I mean, this is what we're deciding on, and it's really that important. So I hope people will get out and vote. Congressman Blumenauer, wrap it up for us.
I'm just happy to observe this with you and to observe it and not be a part of it. But
is that a relief a little bit?
Yeah, but the point I made earlier in terms of being optimistic, the last year and a half, I think things are turning around here. This election is a symbol of that. We've got some great new people to be involved. And we still have our work cut out for us, but I think the voters have given a vote of confidence to a variety of people, a variety of measures. It's up to us to make the most of it.
Thank you, Congressman Blumenauer. Appreciate it, and hope you'll join us again in November. The jury's out on what.
There's a question, right? We'll see what happens. It's a long way to go to November, right?
Well, we hope you'll join us again tonight at 11 on KGW for election results, the latest and analysis.
Complete wrap of everything, including those calls in Oregon 3 and Oregon 5. We're following the DA's race. Could expect more results coming in. You know, on behalf of everybody here, Congressman Blumenauer, Rebecca Tweed, Annie Ellison, and of course, my co-anchor, Laurel Porter, thanks for watching. We'll see you at 11.